Hello and welcome to Python class. Today, I will show you how to assign values to variables in Python and also explain the two important functions, input and print in Python. So let us start with variables. As you all know, variables are for storing values. And in Python, there is no need to specify variable with a specific data type. Suppose x is equal to 2. And then if I say print x is an integer. Now, y is equal to 2.4. So here we are not specifying what type of value we are assigning to the x or y. You can directly assign it. Now let us assign a string to Python. So this is how we can assign values to the variables. In the first cell, I have initialized x with an integer, and then y with a floating point number, and z with a string. But I did not mention what type of data I'm assigning to the variables. So that is how you can initialize different types of data types to the variables. And now we'll see how to assign values to multiple variables in a single line. So I'll take same x, y, and z. X is equal to 2, semicolon. Y is equal to 2.5, semicolon. Z is equal to name. Now I'll print x, print y, print z. Now see, let us execute this. See, x value, y value, and the z values are printed. So this is the way of instead of using multiple cells or multiple lines, we can assign values to multiple variables. We are assigning x, y, and z with 3 different types of data types in a single line. So this is how you can initialize the multiple variables. And also we can assign the same value to the multiple variables, like x is equal to, y is equal to, z is equal to 2. Now again, we'll print the values and check whether the same value is assigned for x, y, and z. So shift enter. So x is initialized with 2, y is also initialized with 2, and z also initialized with 2. So this is how we have to initialize values to the variables. We can assign independently, we can assign in a single line, or we can assign the same value to the multiple variables. Now, let us learn the 2 important functions in Python, input and print. So there are 2 standard IYO functions for inputting and outputting data, that is input and output functions, and that is print function. Okay. So first, I'll just explain what is an input function. So in the previous cells, if you observe, I have initialized the value to the variable directly. Now, the input function, what it does is, it allows the user to input value from the input device, such as the keyboard. So the user can input the value instead of initializing it directly, like what we have done for x, y, and z. So we can, it asks the user to input the value. The syntax for that is, so whatever variable you want to use variable is equal to input within brackets prompt. This is the syntax for the input function in Python. Here, the prompt is used to write message before the inputting the value to the variable. So if I want to initialize x to the value, x to a value 2, then I can use this prompt option also in the input. And this is an optional. And the input function, what first it does is it converts the data into a string. Now we can change, once we give the data, we can change the data that is accepted from the user to appropriate value, that is any numeric value like an integer or floating point number. But before mentioning what type of data we want to enter, the input function just converts the data into a string. Let us see an example. What is this function? Right. So I'm taking variable as x. X is equal to input of prompt is one which we give before the input, before the input, and I just want to give enter a value. So because it is a string, we have to keep it in a quote, enter a value. Okay. So this is considered as a string. Now you just run this. So it's asked you, this is called prompt. So the what prompt does is it writes message before the inputting. So now we can input the value. Whatever value we give, suppose I give the value, this value is converted as a string. And if you want this input to be very specific, that is, I want to input a integer value, then it will take only integer value. If I want to give input a floating point value, it will take only a floating point value. If I want to give a string, if I mention it, then it takes only a string value. Let us take this example, one more example. Now I want to initialize the input as an integer only. Then I can give it as integer. All right, the data type now here is integer. Now I have specifically mentioned to consider only the integer values to the variable. So just enter. Now if I try to give other than any integer value, it will raise an error. Let us suppose we give a floating point number 2.4. So it tells you that the invalid literal for int, because we asked to input the data type as an integer and we have given a floating point number, so it has raised an error. Now I'll just try to give a string, suppose, yeah, name, then execute once again, same, again an error rise, mentioning it is called a value error because we have initialized with the int and then we have given a string, so it is there is an error in initializing the input. So now we can take the same one and now you just try to enter an integer, then it takes the value. So no error has rise. So so this means we have specifically mentioned to take only the integer value. So this is the input function. This is the syntax for the input function. So we have to take a variable, then write input or a prompt. Prompt can be an optional. You can mention it or you did not mention it. So here I have used enter a value as a prompt. Then whenever I run the cell, then it asks to enter the value. Here, because the data type is not mentioned, it will take all types of data values. Suppose I just try to give a floating point number, then it takes this floating point number. If I try to give a string also, it will take. If we give a character also, it will consider, because we are not mentioning the data type for the X. But in the next cell, we are mentioning the data type for the input for the X is an integer. So only the integer value must be assigned to X. And if you try to give other than integer, it will rise an error. So that is called the input function in Python. This is a standard input function. And the input function, as I told you, it converts data into a string unless and until it is specifically mentioned. Now let us go for the second function in Python, that is called for the outputting the value onto the screen. We already have seen here print as the function which is used to output the values onto the screen. So we can output use print function like this, or you can also write it as, I'll just take the same example and write the print function. I can write x is equal to 2, print. This is an optional. If you want, you can mention the value of x is, value of x is, I can mention this, comma x. I can write like this, or directly without mentioning any comment, I can write print x. So the x value will be printed. And I can also write print option. Print option comes with the two optional arguments called sep and end. One is a separator and the second one is called end. So print option comes with the two optional arguments, sep and end. Let us see what are this what are the two arguments and what is the need for this two arguments. Suppose I'll just try to print the string apple, banana, and orange. So if I print, so all the three fruit names are printed like apple, banana, and orange. Now I just use the separator here in this. As I told you, separator, the argument separator is an optional argument. We can use it. There is no need for using it, but we can use it as an optional argument. And the purpose of separator is it adds a separator between strings to be printed. Now, what are the strings we have printed? Apple, banana, and orange. And if you want them to print with a separator, we can use the separator. I'll just write separator. With that, within the quotes, you have to write whatever the separator you want. I just write comma. Then let us see what happens to this. So this comma is called the separator. So that is the purpose of the separator. So separator separates the strings to be printed. So in the previous case, if you see the print option, we have only space between the strings apple, banana, and orange. Now we have a separator called comma. And also we can use different separators. Let us see one more separator. This is comma. I can also write hyphen. Right? And I could also write, I can use slash n. Let us see what it gives. So it has printed in a new line. All the strings are printed in a new line because we have given the new line slash n as the separator. And I can also use tab. Then it will generate the space, increase the space between, if you could observe the apple, banana, and orange here and apple, banana, and orange here, the space between them has increased. So that is the separator argument. Now the print option also comes with another optional argument called end. Now let us see what is this end argument. And end argument is used to append any string at the output of print statement in Python. So again, we'll go back to use this option. And then again, we will use now the end option. I'll just write end is equal to whatever you want to end the statements. We'll see both the print statement, difference between this print and use of end argument. This let us see. So it has inserted a full stop at the end of the string. So end argument is used to append any string at the output of print statement in Python. So you can also use a new line in the as an end. You can write /n, and then you can write a question mark. So it is inserting at the end, right? Question mark in there. We can use both the arguments combinedly. So let us go for that. So we'll write print separator is equal to comma and just writes end. End should be, I'll write full stop. Then it is. So separator, all the three are separated with commas and ended with the full stop. So these two are called optional arguments for the print option. So this is the standard input and output functions in Python. That is how to input value to a variable by using input function, or you can directly assign the value to the variable directly without mentioning any data type. We can also mention the multiple variables in a single line, and we can also assign a value to same value to multiple variables, and we can use input function for inputting the values. So the input function, we can ask to input any value without mentioning the data type, or with a specific data type like integer or floating. I'll just give one more example for the inputting for the, suppose I just asked to give a floating point now, assign a floating point number to the x value. Let us see this one also, 2.4. Then it will not arise any error. And if I try to give the integer value, then it will rise an error. So that is just right. 2, then it will rise an error. So floating, it has considered 2.0. And I'll just try to give a string like a character, group of characters. So it could not convert string to floating point number. So that is the importance of input function. So user can assign the value. So before assigning the value, what it is, it holds, right? It holds for to write the message, right? This is the prompt which you have given, and it is printed before the input value. We didn't enter any input value, it has printed before. And when input function is executed, whenever we run this cell, the program halts, right? This has been in a halt position unless and until the user gives the data. So this is the input function, and this is how you can output the value onto the screen. And the print option comes with two optional arguments, sep and end, and the importance of separator and I hope you all understood. Thank you.